There's a photograph that still circulates in certain neighborhoods of South Central Los Angeles. It shows a young man, maybe 17, throwing up a hand sign outside a liquor store on Crenshaw Boulevard. His name was Raymond Washington. The year was 1969. Within 5 years, he would help create something that would spread to nearly every major city in America, claim tens of thousands of lives, and fundamentally alter the landscape of urban America. He called it the Crips. What Raymond Washington couldn't have known, standing there in the California sun, was that he was lighting a fuse that would never stop burning. But this isn't just Raymond's story. This is the story of what happens when poverty, systemic neglect, and the basic human need for belonging collide in the forgotten corners of American cities. This is about real people who made choices that seemed like the only choices available. Some became legends, some became cautionary tales, most became both. Raymond Washington wasn't supposed to matter to history. Born in Texas, raised in South Central, he was just another black kid navigating a Los Angeles that had perfected the art of contained rage. The Watts riots were still fresh in everyone's memory. The Black Panthers had shown a generation what organized power could look like, but Raymond saw something different. He saw the neighborhood kids, the ones too young for the Panthers, too angry for patience, and too hungry for respect to wait for social change. In 1969, Raymond and his friend Stanley Tookie Williams began organizing teenagers along Washington High School. They called themselves the Baby Avenues at first, then the Avenue Cribs, then finally just the Crips. The name's origin is disputed. Some say it came from crib, meaning home or young person. Others insist it was a misspelling of crypt, meant to invoke death and fear. Tookie Williams, who would later be executed by the state of California in 2005, stood 6'3" and had a presence that could empty rooms. Together, he and Raymond created something that felt like family to kids who desperately needed one. But here's what most people don't understand. The Crips didn't start as a criminal enterprise. Raymond Washington initially envisioned something closer to community protection, a group that would defend the neighborhood from outside gangs like the Brims and the Puris. It was almost romantic in its origins. Within 2 years, that romance had curdled into something else entirely. Violence became currency, territory became identity, and the color blue became a flag worth dying for. By 1971, the Crips had fractured into multiple sets. The Rollin' 60s, the 8 Trey Gangsters, the Grape Street Crips, each claiming different blocks, each willing to kill to defend them. And when you create a monster, someone always creates something to fight it. The Bloods emerged as a direct response to Crip dominance, uniting smaller gangs under the banner of Red. Sylvester Scott and Benson Owens, original members of the Puris, helped forge this alliance. What started as self-defense became an arms race of brutal proportions. Raymond Washington never lived to see what he'd created metastasize nationwide. In 1979, he was shot and killed in South Central. He was 25 years old. Some say it was a Crip who killed him, which would make sense in the tragic mathematics of gang life, the creator consumed by his creation. While Los Angeles burned with the Crips Bloods war, a different kind of empire was taking shape in Chicago. Larry Hoover didn't look like a gang leader. He was thoughtful, articulate, and possessed an intelligence that would have taken him far in legitimate business. Instead, he took those talents to the streets of the South Side, where he transformed a street gang called the Gangster Disciples into something unprecedented. A structured, hierarchical organization with bylaws, appointed leadership, and political aspirations. Hoover's vision was audacious. He spoke of community uplift, of using gang structure to protect black neighborhoods, to provide for families, to create economic opportunity where the system had created none. In the 1990s, while incarcerated, he attempted to rebrand the Gangster Disciples as growth and development, claiming they had evolved beyond criminality into community activism. He corresponded with politicians. He organized voter registration drives. He talked about peace treaties and economic empowerment. Behind the philosophy and the political theater, the Gangster Disciples were running a drug empire that generated millions of dollars annually. They controlled housing projects like Cabrini Green and Robert Taylor homes with military precision. Members had ranks: governors, regents, coordinators, enforcers, each with specific responsibilities in the hierarchy. They had a constitution, a code of conduct, and penalties for violations that ranged from physical beatings to execution. What made Larry Hoover dangerous wasn't just his intelligence, it was his charisma. He could make young men believe they were part of something righteous, even as they destroyed their own communities. He's currently serving 6 life sentences in the federal Supermax prison in Colorado, locked down 23 hours a day, but his influence persists. The Gangster Disciples remain one of the most organized criminal enterprises in American history, with an estimated 50,000 members across the United States. Then there's Jeff Fort, the enigmatic leader of Chicago's Black P. Stones, later known as Rukns. Fort took gang organization to its logical extreme, converting his gang into a supposed Islamic sect and attempting to broker a deal with Libya's Muammar Gaddafi to commit terrorist acts on American soil in exchange for millions of dollars. Federal agents recorded Fort discussing plans to shoot down an airplane. It sounds like fiction, but the trial transcripts don't lie. Fort showed how easily the structure of a street gang could be repurposed for ideology, how marginalized young men searching for purpose could be weaponized for causes they barely understood. Stanley Tookie Williams spent nearly 25 years on death row at San Quentin State Prison. During that time, he did something that many found impossible to believe. He changed, or at least he claimed to. Tookie began writing children's books warning kids away from gang life. He authored protocols for peace treaties between warring sets. He was nominated multiple times for the Nobel Peace Prize. Celebrities championed his cause. Activists held vigils. But here's the complicated truth. Redemption doesn't erase history. Tookie Williams was convicted of murdering 4 people in 1979. At his trial, witnesses described him laughing about one of the killings, making sounds mimicking the death gurgles of a man he'd shot. Whether the man on death row in 2005 was the same man who committed those murders in 1979 became a question that divided California. Governor Arnold Schwarzenegger ultimately denied clemency, and Tookie was executed by lethal injection on December 13, 2005. What haunts people about Tookie's story isn't just whether he truly transformed, it's what his transformation said about all the other Tookies out there, the thousands of young men who joined gangs as teenagers and never got the chance to become anything else. His children's books with titles like Gangs and Violence and Gangs and Self-Esteem were attempts to save kids from the life he'd created. But the question lingers, can you redeem yourself for helping to architect a movement that led to thousands of deaths? And if you can't, what does that say about the possibility of change for anyone? There's a girl named Melody Ross who nobody outside of Baltimore remembers. She was 9 years old when a stray bullet from a gang shootout entered her bedroom window and killed her while she slept. That was 1993. Melody wasn't in a gang. She didn't throw up signs or wear colors. She was just a little girl who lived on the wrong block. There are thousands of Melody Rosses. They don't get documentaries or books written about them. They become statistics, tragic footnotes in the ongoing war that most of America pretends isn't happening. The human cost of gang violence isn't measured just in bodies, though there are plenty of those. In Los Angeles County alone, between 1985 and 1995, gang violence claimed over 7,000 lives. The cost is measured in mothers who can't leave their houses, in children who hear gunshots as background noise, in entire communities that have been psychologically traumatized across generations. It's measured in potential never realized, in artists and engineers and teachers who never got the chance to become themselves because they were murdered at 16. But there's another cost that nobody talks about, the cost to the gang members themselves. There's a former 8-tray gangster Crip named Kody Scott who wrote under the name Sanyika Shakur who described joining the gang at 11 years old and committing his first murder at 13. His memoir, Monster, is one of the most unflinching accounts of gang life ever written. Kody describes the psychological transformation required to survive as a gang member, how you have to kill part of your own humanity, how violence becomes addictive, how you live in a constant state of hypervigilance because death could come from any direction at any moment. Kody eventually renounced gang life and became an activist and author, but the streets never fully let him go. He was in and out of prison for years. In 2021, Kody Scott was found dead in a homeless encampment in Los Angeles. He was 57. The official cause of death was listed as accidental, but people who knew him understand the streets killed him decades earlier. His body just took a while to catch up. This is what gang life actually looks like when you strip away the music videos and the mythology. It's not glory, it's not power. It's a trap that catches children and spits out corpses. The average life expectancy for an active gang member in some neighborhoods is mid-20s. Think about that. 25, 26, 27, and you're already on borrowed time. The tragedy is how avoidable it all was. Every sociologist who studies gangs reaches the same conclusion. They flourish where legitimate opportunity withers. They thrive in neighborhoods where schools are underfunded, where jobs are scarce, where police are seen as occupiers rather than protectors. Gangs offer what society doesn't: immediate income, protection, identity, and belonging. Raymond Washington and Stanley Williams didn't create the conditions that made the Crips possible. America did that. They just responded to those conditions in the most destructive way imaginable. There's another photograph taken in 2016 that shows something remarkable. It's a peace treaty gathering in Watts with members of different Crip and Blood sets standing together, shaking hands, trying to figure out how to stop the killing. The men in the photograph look tired. Many of them have buried friends, brothers, sons. They've spent decades at war, and most of them can't even remember what started it. The streets remember everything. They remember Raymond Washington and his dream of protection. They remember Melody Ross and her stolen future. They remember all the blood spilled over colors and corners and perceived disrespect. But maybe, just maybe, they can also remember something else, that every person in this story was human, that every gang member was once just a kid who wanted to matter. That the real tragedy isn't just what they became, but what they could have been if anyone had cared enough to offer them a different choice.